Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to another lecture on TEFL. Today we have to start what? Alright, we have to start a new book as well, right? What is the book? Practical English Language Teaching by David Noonan. Fine? So again, whatever the course outlines I gave you in the very first lecture, so we are following it, and today, in fact, in the last lecture, what did we do? We completed our methods of foreign language teaching, and the last method was CLT, Communicative Language Teaching. Remember that? So we did that, and I hope you have understood it, and I'm sure now you have an idea about these methods. What are these methods? Why we need to know about these methods, and how can we improve our teaching by having know-how of these methods. And I am sure I have received feedback from you students that, well, you are really enjoying these methods, and you have improved the teaching, and also you have gained insight of the teaching, that how can you be successful the teacher. So this course again is very important that you are pursuing in this semester, and again in the next semester you will be having more practical approaches for foreign language teaching. So this one we are just building grounds for being an excellent the teacher, and base was that we in fact need to know what are the methods that we finished discussing in the last lecture, and we had a overview of those methods as well. We started with grammar translation method, direct method, and all that, and then we moved on in the last approach, that was communicative language teaching. So as usual, what to do? First, review, and we need to review the last lecture. So in fact, I hope you have an idea what did we do in this last method. So again, mind you that what in this last method, of course, we talked about the principles of communicative language teaching, and all these points are there that we have done in the last method. You see that word authentic, really I should be authentic, fine, different in fact functions of the language we need to know, of course, and forms of a language in a different function are important, and then language at different levels, of course, you see, of course, sometime we need to know which vocabulary item need to be used, and then in fact coherence and cohesion, of course, are there through activities. We inculcate these things to our students, and then we talk about the importance of games and activities and all that, and we talk about 5 techniques in that method. After these principles, we saw that, well, there is cooperation, fine, the role plays are there, language forms, fine, are there, then teacher as an advisor, right, choice, again what to say, there's a choice for the learner about what to say and how to say, both the communicative competence and linguistic competence, and then listening to authentic language as in work, was a homework. And here we talk about the techniques that of course we need to review it, right? Those were the principles. I thought I should give you those principles again, so that you would know in fact that what are the principles of CLT. Very important in fact. Why we spent 3 lectures on it? Because we realized that this CLT is in now, right? And in fact, of course, advanced world have shifted over to this approach, and experts of the TEFL have realized, have accepted that the CLT is the good approach for foreign language teaching, and it works and it serves the purpose, because this is an approach that, you see, helps students fine in communicating in the target language. And how we achieve that? Again, we achieve it through this approach, that we make our students communicate by giving them different activities, and once they have done with the course, so definitely they in fact perform well on stage. They become good stage secretaries, they become good in fact debaters in foreign language, and they can in fact speak in different situations, with confidence, right? So that was of course our goal that we saw in CLT, and for that, how did we achieve it? We had different techniques. We used authentic material, we used scrambled sentences to inculcate coherence and cohesion among the students. We see that this is the area which is in fact where students struggle more. They have ideas, but they cannot link those ideas. They have a lot to say, but what they do that their thoughts are disorganized. And generally, in fact, whenever you read, of course, any the paper, the answer sheet, and the teacher write what that student or ideas are not organized. So it means that this majority lacks in this cohesion and in coherence. So in this CLT, of course, this approach, yes, focuses on communication function, but again, through activities, cohesion and coherence is also passed on or is inculcated. So we see this is a very important area of the language. But generally, in fact, if you see around, if you talk about the teaching methodology that you have been attending your institutions, right? I mean, you all have 14 years of education, but the point is that this is still, you must have realized that the people are not coherent in their thoughts. And what is the point? That you see that this coherence is lacking. And again, there was no activity, in fact, designed by the teachers so that students would overcome this problem. And generally, of course, the way the English language is taught in our schools, in our, in fact, colleges, that you know well, that what happens is generally that, of course, there are textbooks prescribed by the specific boards, and the teacher come and simply they read those poems or the essays and they go back, right? So maybe after your inter, then you may realize that, well, you need to speak the language, and you feel that now you need to do another course. And look, for example, after attending that of course, institutions for 12 years, and after, in fact, studying this course, English, particularly as a subject, for 12 years, still students are unable to communicate. And after their graduation, they come for the language course, and they come for the language course in English when they have to. They feel that they cannot get a job unless they can be a good, unless they are a good communicators. Fine. So for that, once they feel it that they need to be communicatively strong, then they join different institutions, of course, where they'll improve their spoken language. And again, of course, in the spoken language institutions, if you see that over there, what did the teacher do? Exceptions are there, but in most of the language centers, even the teachers are not trained. They don't know about the methods, or they just know about the public speaking. And what they do, that they give topics to the students, and the students come and they speak on the topic. So that's why the trained teachers are not there. Then how? If you can interview teachers, and you will find out that do they know about different teaching methodology for foreign language teaching. And then you will realize that a lot of teachers, in fact, they are not trained, but they are doing that job. Fine. So therefore, in fact, you are lucky enough that you have this course. And in this course, you come to know about different methods. That, of course, and see, the approach of Larson is excellent. That you see in that approach that he took you to a class, and where you saw that the method is being exploited, and you saw all the activities. And then what he did, that he gave you observations, and from observations, yes, there was a principle behind, right? So he, in fact, Larson listed down all the observations, and then from those, you see, and we gave you the principle behind what is the observation and what is the principle. Fine. So what happened, students? Then you see, then he reviewed all those principles, and he answered all 10 questions. The goals of the teacher, the role of the teacher, role of the student, in fact. Fine. And then we see characteristics of language, of course, language learning process. And then he talks about interaction. He talks about what language areas. He talks about language skills, and talk about a role of L1. And he also talk about what, you see, how evaluation is done and how errors are responded. So these are the points, you see, that, of course, you see, that Larson talks about. And at the end also he concludes, and he says that, well, this is the method is there, and it's up to you that how you handle this method. Do you feel that this method can improve your foreign language teaching or not? And if you feel that this method is useful method, what can be done? For example, how this method can help you, which activities of this method can help your method of the teaching. And he says that you need not to replace altogether your method of teaching a foreign language, but what you can do, see that, of course, how this method can be can be a help to you if you feel it, right? So this is what, in this way we saw those 10 methods. And if you want to be good language teachers, in fact, so you need to know these methods. Only then you can exploit these techniques in the class, and then you can do research also. For example, you want to do research on direct method, on its effectiveness, or on CLT, for example, communicate. You cannot say that, you never know. Maybe after some time you will feel that this CLT would be a failure, right? Like we saw that once there was a time that the grammar translation method was the only method, and that was the most used method there, right? So it was dominating method, you see. But then you saw the 1960s and 70s, what happened? The method was challenged, you see. And then we talk about the audio-lingual approach and all that. So this is, you see, that maybe of course after some time we start feeling that people would think over it. And you know, these days of course we are in the age of research, and definitely when a lot of research is being done, then you may feel that after some time we may have some other method that would be even better than CLT, the communicative language teaching. So far of course this method is accepted, right, as of course one of the best methods, right, for foreign language teaching, in fact. So that's why we see there are some techniques are there. We saw the scrambled sentences were there to inculcate cohesion and coherence. Then language games were there to give students relaxed time, to give students enough time to relax and work on that. And then also picture strips were there, really important, right, effective, fine. And then different role plays were there, so to prepare students for their social situations. Is that clear? So today, my dear students, of course I told you earlier that we are going to start, right, what, another book that I told you earlier. This is the book, my dear students, for practical English language teaching. Fine, it is for those who are practicing teacher and also for those who are student of TEFL, this program. So he is by David Nunan, in fact, by David Nunan, N-U-N-A-N. So here, in fact, the person is editor, of course, and he has compiled, of course. This is the good thing of this book is that it has been compiled after consulting important, in fact, researchers, right? So, I mean, that there are, in this book, what happens is that, first of all, we will try to explore, in fact, skills, in fact. You see, exploring. See, if I give you the outcome, of course, I told you in the very first day that what is it? It is this, in fact, the first one is the methodology. That what is the methodology, right? And then we will move on exploring skills, and then we'll talk about other sub-skills of language. So here, what is it, my dear students? What? First of all, we'll try to explore skills, and all the 4 skills, reading, writing, listening, speaking, and then we will try to explore language. Now, how can we explore language? For example, you see, talk about pronunciation, talk about vocabulary, talk about grammar and all that. And finally, we'll talk about how can we support the learning process. So this book has 3 sections. How many? 3 sections are there. The first section talks about exploring the skills, second, exploring language, and third one is supporting the learning process. So there are 3 sections, and there are different topics under these sections. And of course, why this book is useful? Because it is not the single person effort, because he has compiled, in fact, of course, excellent research work of different people, and he has put all those works in one book. And definitely once you listen to the lectures, you will read the text also, so things will be more clear to you. Is that clear? Right? So that is what a brief overview of this book. And let's start now. The first chapter of this book is what is methodology. And students, well, see that, well, the title is, the first section is exploring skills. We talk about reading, writing, listening, speaking. But before we start that, we need to review what is methodology, in fact. So let's have a look, my dear students, what is methodology. So here, in the word method, and we talked about many methods, in fact, right? And in the very first lecture, I talked about that method is what method comprised of your principles and activities. Principles are techniques, right? And then we saw that what makes a method success. Fine. So over there, definitely we see the teacher's role and all that. So dear students, here talking about methodology, and again there is a term curriculum development. What is curriculum development, for example? Curricula, you know the word curriculum, right? I mean, curricular activities, you know, right? And then you may know the term extracurricular activities. Fine. So curriculum, what is curriculum development, my dear student, right? What is CD, and how you make your curriculum for, and in our case particularly, we are the students of the TEFL. We are preparing ourselves to teach English as a foreign language. So we, in our context, what can we say? That what should we teach? What should be the content for foreign language teaching? And this is really important, of course, that what should be the content. You can debate on that, right? Some people say we should take material from the market, like in the CLT talks about that it should be taken from the real world, right? Taken from the newspaper, from magazine and all that, right? And that can be exploited best in the class. And some, if you talk about the grammar translation method, so over there we saw that the passage is taken from literary sources, right? See that? So again, there are different methods, and their curriculum development is different. And again, in one method we saw, for example, you remember that TPR, total physical response, students design, of course, syllabus, right? Students, in fact, of course, they what they do, that they record their fine, all right? So what happens, friends? Yes, their voices are recorded, in fact. Is that in TPR? No, you go, of course, right? So where, of course, mean? Yes, in community language learning, in fact, where the voices are recorded and the students, of course, what they follow that. Is that clear? So this is what I'm talking about. I've been talking this curriculum development, that what should we include in this one, right? What should we include, right? What should we teach? What should be the content for foreign language teaching? And that's why we have this term curriculum development, and there are three components of curriculum development. First thing is syllabus design, maybe a very common term, you must have heard it, that you have to design the syllabus, and then methodology, and finally evaluation. There are three things: syllabus design, these are the sub components of what? Curriculum development. So methodology, I'll give you what is methodology, but simple word mean method, you know, and ology, of course, the knowledge of the method. And but this term curriculum development, you need to know. So what is it? That how you develop curricula for foreign language teaching. What are the components of this curriculum development? Yes, first one is syllabus design. You design the syllabus, of course. And second, what is it? Methodology. And finally, evaluation. Now, what is syllabus design, by the way? It has to do with what? Selecting, sequencing, and justifying content. I told you that, well, when you design, of course, the syllabus design mean the content. And you have to do three things. Select, for example, now first of all, select the content. Fine, again, it depends that way to select, right? What should we do? Should we take content from the real world, or should we take content from the literary sources, or should we take content from the students, the learners, or should we provide them content in the peripheral learning? Clear? So this is the point that you see that can be done. We have to see this curriculum that while developing that curricula, we need to know, see that what selecting. First of all, we need to select, and while selecting, of course, should we, keep experts in mind, or it is the prerogative of the teacher to select the content, or you see, you can have a meeting with your the council to select the content again. And if you are practicing teacher, then you know well that what should be the content. So selection of content is one. Second thing is sequencing, how you sequence the content. And it's very important, in fact. Like sometimes what happens that, of course, your sequence is that you start with the complex things and you move on to the common things. This is one sequence. Second is that you move from simple to complex, that you discuss simple things first and then you move on to the complex things. So yes, it's very important. The sequence is also important. That definitely, of course, if you start with the complex thing initially, so it's common sense that student may not be able to absorb. But the teacher feels that initially they are fresh and they can absorb the complex, difficult concepts. But the student feels that they are now, of course, they are beginning and they don't know basic terminology. So it would be difficult for them to understand, in fact, comprehend what this complex things initially. So while sequencing the content, what can we do? We need to start with the simple things and we move on to the complex things. So again, it depends on the situation. Again, it depends on the background of the learner. Again, it depends on the time constraint. Sometimes, the learners come and they have very short time. So in that short time, you have to give them more, and sometimes you exclude unimportant things, of course, easy things, and directly you move on to the important things. So sequencing is important. First, selecting, then sequencing means ordering. How would you sequence it? And finally, what you can call justifying the content. Whatever content you include, you have to justify that why to include report writing in, example, a course on business communication. Why to include, in fact, see a course on letter writing, for example, for business students. So you have to justify, and justification can be students have to write reports in their organizations, so this report writing should be there. Or students have to make presentation in their workplaces, so the presentation is there, in fact. I hope you understand. Yeah, so this is what curriculum, yes, the curriculum development, and the first thing is syllabus design. And syllabus design is what? It is to do with what? Selecting, sequencing, and justifying. You have to justify, right? Whatever, in fact, content you are using, you have to justify the content, you have to sequence the content, and also the third thing is, the first thing, of course, is what? That selecting, sequencing, and justifying. The next thing is methodology, right? What is the next thing, my dear students? Methodology. So here it has to do with what? Selecting, sequencing, and justifying learning tasks and experiences. Yeah, like we see in the class, right? Whatever activities that you have in class, right, you have to justify that this is the activity and this is the principle behind. Fine. Like you saw, now you are in a position to give a lot of examples that you have seen in all different methods that we have talked about, that why the teacher uses, in fact, why teacher gives the students a list of vocabulary items, because he wants to build their vocabulary. In fact, why students, in fact, he asks them to make sentences. Why is teacher focuses on sentence formation? Because the principle behind is that they should be able to write in the target language. So this is what that you see, the methodology is, that whatever you see your methodology is, you have to select it, again you have to sequence it, and then justifying the learning task. In the first, in syllabus design, you have to justify the content. Here you have to select, sequence, and justify the tasks, right? The learning tasks and what you can say experiences. This is what methodology. Third, of course, component is subcomponent of this is what curriculum development is. What? That is evaluation. Now, what is evaluation? Very simple word, evaluate, right? And we have been talking about this evaluation in all the methods that we talk about, that how teacher evaluates the students, right? And we saw in some method the teacher, in fact, evaluates the students formally. In fact, in some methods, yes, in a classroom activities, evaluation is done. Either they have learned something or not. So again, the third subcomponent of the curriculum development is what? Evaluation. That how would you do? It has to do with how well students have mastered the objectives of the course and how effectively the course has met their needs, in fact. I hope you understand. That's why when you set objectives of the course initially, so you need to know that what are the objectives. Fine. And at the end of the course, you see that either you have achieved your objectives or not. So these are, my dear students, three subcomponents of what? Curriculum development. The first one is syllabus design. Second one is methodology. Third one is what? Evaluation. What is curriculum design? Yes, it has to do with what? Selecting, sequencing, and third thing is justifying the content. That is what? Syllabus design. Whatever syllabus means item, whatever content you need to incorporate in your foreign language teaching syllabus, you have to sequence it, you have to select it, it should be selective. Fine. So again, where do you select? You have to see around, you have to meet people. In fact, you can, again, a good syllabus design considers, its users, the learners. Fine. And again, of course, the learners and the market as well. For example, we're talking about the business students, and definitely these business students have to be in industry. So we need to, in fact, do a research, and we need to find out, of course, feedback from the industry, so that we would be able to incorporate things which industry requires, and that can improve our syllabus design. Is that clear? So selecting, again, selecting from various sources, authentic sources. In fact, it can be from the market, and if you preparing students from the market and the business students, I gave example, right, or for whatever the purpose is. So wherever the students are to be placed, for example, teachers, again, in the educational industry, you will see that a lot of students are, definitely this TEFL particularly, of course, helps you in the teaching. So again, we can visit different colleges, universities, to find out that what universities require, what do they see in these in the TEFL instructors, so that those things would be incorporated in the syllabus, right? So selecting, then again sequencing, how would you order it, and finally you have to justify it. In methodology, again, very simple: selecting, sequencing, and justifying the learning task that is how you are using it, and also experiences. And third, here's my student, is what is it? Evaluation. That how, of course, it has to do with what? How well the students have mastered, right, the objectives of the course, what are their achievements, in fact. So this is, my dear students, curriculum development, and its three components: syllabus design, methodology, and evaluation. Yes. So here now we'll come to what is methodology, right? Here the Longman Dictionary of Applied Linguistics defines methodology as, what is it? The study of the practices and procedures used in teaching, and the principles and beliefs that underlie them. Very simple. What is it? That what are the practices, what are the procedures, we use in teaching, and what are the principles and belief underlying them, in fact. The thought that I have been talking about, that whatever activity we use in the class, whatever activity the teacher exploits in the class, and there is a principle behind. You have read, in fact, of course, hundreds of principles in the methods we talked about, and we have seen a lot of observations. So in every observation, you see, there was a principle behind. Sometime we saw that, well, there is what the teacher focuses on, vocabulary building. Sometimes the teacher wants to develop fluency in the students. Sometimes, of course, the teacher wants to have communicative competence in the students. So again, sometimes the teacher wants to have competence of the language one, like in grammar translation method. So whatever your procedure is, whatever your practice is, my dear students, there is a principle behind, and that's what this Longman says, that we have to study those practices, whatever those activities, and the procedure that we use in the class, and the principle and beliefs that underlie that. What are the beliefs? Of course, what do the experts believe? That, of course, this is the activity, and again, the activity designer, what does he want to achieve from that? And if he has designed a game, if he have designed, for example, a role play, so what does he want to achieve? And only if the learner, if the teacher is trained, he can do it well. Otherwise, it would be difficult for if the teacher doesn't know what is a method and what is a principle and what is an activity, if he is confused among these the terms, and if he doesn't know difference between these concepts, so it would be difficult for him to in fact express. It would be difficult for him to apply all these things. So only if somebody is, if the teacher has knowledge, he knows what are the principles, he knows what are the methods, right, and then what are the activities, so then he can he can justify. So that's what this Longman says. Again, methodology includes what? A study of the nature of language skills. Again, this is methodology. Like, again, of course, in the foreign language teaching, generally, of course, we teach all the 4 languages. We teach about listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Fine. So here, that's what methodology includes. What? First of all, I gave you, in fact, definition of methodology by Longmans. And then now, what does methodology includes? First of all, a study of the nature of language skills, mean reading, writing, and all 4 skills, and the procedure for teaching them. That's why methodology should be in our mind, and that's why this is the first, in fact, topic from David Noonan on methodology for foreign language teaching. And before we know it, we need to know what is a methodology, and I gave you what? The definition, and definition is clear to you, that what? The study of the practices and procedures used in what? In teaching, and the principles and beliefs underlined in them. And then, of course, we saw that it includes what? A study of the nature of language skills, mean all the input skills and output skills, or either they are literacy skills, or they are, in fact, productive skills, or they are production skills. Either they are oral skills, for example, listening and speaking, or talking about writing. And then what are the procedures, fine, for teaching them? I mean, how do we teach listening skills? And definitely, if you being the TEFL teacher, you will be teaching writing skill, you will be teaching listening skill, and all 4 skills. So definitely you have to design activities for the teaching. I mean, if you just have a cassette player and you take it to the class and you make students listen, right, that old BBC dialogues, so it means that you are not creative, you are not innovative, you have just used the old approach that has been used. Again, I mean, it's good or bad, it's debatable, that is one, but why not? I mean, why can't we create more things from that? So that is one, the methodology includes. Also, methodology includes what? Study of the preparation of lesson plans. That is again very important. So when you make a lesson, definitely in your next semester, we will learn how to make lesson plan, very important. And again, as per as the job market, I tell you that once you apply for a job, and sometime you are asked to make a lesson plan, and not only to make that lesson plan, but also to use that lesson plan in a class. So yes, this is again methodology I'm talking about. Syllabus design one, second of all methodology, very important. I gave you definition of methodology, and then I told you what does methodology include. And I said, well, of course, study of nature of what? Language skills and all 4 skills, and their procedures for teaching them. That what is the procedure for reading skill, procedure for teaching reading skills, and procedure for teaching other skills are there. And also, this methodology includes what? Study of the preparation of lesson plans, material and textbooks for teaching language skills. Again, it's very important. Method also includes that you see what material you would use, right? And of course, how relevant that material is, what is the authenticity of that material is, and what does that material include, fine? And then what you see, you also see your lesson plan, study of the preparation of lesson plan, that while preparing a lesson, you being TEFL student, what you do, right? What a good lesson plan should have, right? And also the textbooks, for example, which text we can incorporate in that method. So methodology also includes that. Then students, what? Evaluation. What? Evaluation and comparison of language teaching methods, example, audiolingual method. Again, you have to value this thing we have been talking about for last, in fact, 15 lectures. Sorry, for last, yes, 20 lectures, that you need to evaluate. And we had a lot of discussion on that, that whatever the methods are available, right, you know all those methods which are in, and you need to evaluate. Fine? And again, you have to compare, in fact, that which method, in fact, does well in this situation. You have to see, you have to take decision as per the situation. If you are dealing with adult learners, those who come from their offices, fine, and definitely they are tired. You see, the whole day they spend in their offices, and they need to improve their communicative competence of English. So they come to you, and definitely then you can think, oh, what to do? Should we use Suggestopedia? Should we use direct method, or should we use CLT? And if you suggest one of these methods, and why? Right? Why not direct method instead of Suggestopedia? Why not silent way instead of Suggestopedia? Why not CLL, community language teaching, or any other method? So you have to compare and contrast, and considering the environment, considering your user's need also. And again, if you want to have that client and counselor, of course, approach, then you can see that. Is that clear? So my dear students, you see, this methodology also includes your what? The study of preparation of lesson plans, material and books, and second, evaluation and comparison of language teaching methods. Fine. And then whatever method you select, then you need to think that which activities, for example, can be used, and how we can design those activities, and what are the principles behind those activities. So again, the method, the principles, and the techniques or the activities. Is that clear? So methodology includes what? First, it includes study of nature of language skills, and second includes what? Preparation of lesson plans, material, and the textbook that you can suggest, you can recommend in the class. And third thing is, whatever method you use, you need to evaluate it, and of course you need to evaluation and comparison, of course, of language teaching methods. That is important. So let's come to the background to language teaching methodology. In fact, why we are of course talking about this, my dear students. So of course, language teaching method is a single set of procedures which teachers are to follow in the classroom. So what is it, my dear students? A language teaching method is what? A single set of procedures, right, that we use being teachers in the class, right, that we follow in the class. If the teacher is using CLT, what does he do? If the teacher use CLL, community language learning, or if the teacher employs silent way, or if the teacher uses what? The direct method in the class, right? So what procedures, which activities he uses that. So that is, we call it what? Language teaching method, single set of procedures that we teachers use in the class to teach a foreign language. And then, my dear students, methods, of course, they are based on what? Set of beliefs, right? Every method there is a theory behind. In fact, so they are of course based on set of beliefs about the nature of language and learning. Is that clear? So there is a theory behind, for example, of every method. If you talk about audiolingual method, so there is a theory behind, well, the drills, for example, and then the behavioral theory, of course, that says that you learn things by drills, and once you do those drills repeatedly, so that learning becomes your habit. So that is again the theory behind, of course, behavioralism. And also we teach different patterns, and that ALM based on behavioral and structural theories. Is that clear, students? Yes. So that's why whatever method used, that is what they based on a set of beliefs. Is that clear? All right. Then, my dear students, the methods contrast with approaches. Yes, we saw that definitely in one method we have a different approach. Other method altogether gives a different method. In one method, for example, we saw that, well, the emphasis on what? Listening skill. In TPR, for example, we saw that, well, the first students need to listen more, of course. They need to, in fact, decode. They need to comprehend. That's why we also call it comprehension approach. So what we saw in that method, that lot of listening is there. And then you start speaking and you talk about communicative language teaching. So what's that? What is there? Yeah, of course, focuses on communication. Again, you go back to direct method. Well, we see more focus on communication. So, and in total physical response method, we saw that, well. And then there are actions, of course, and then intake, and then you learn. In silent way, yes, teacher remains silent and students are active. Is that clear? So that is what mean the methods, of course, they contrast with the approaches. Every method of foreign language teaching has different techniques, different approaches, and we talk about approach is a general term, philosophical term. In fact, we can use the term technique as well. Yes, the oldest method, of course, that is GTM, grammar translation method. And of course, how do we teach the target language? By using L1. Simple word, of course, that we in fact translate the target language into our L1. So again, that's what we learn, in fact. So L1 is used in that grammar translation method. So focus on what? Translation and what? That is L1. So use of L1 is maximum over there, and this is the oldest method. And then once we realized that yes, it is a method. And why? Of course, we had a discussion on that method, that method was designed to what? To be able to read literature of classical languages. So yes, if you want to enjoy literature, my dear students, so then GTM is fine, it works, in fact, it's there. But if you want to use it for communicative purposes, you have to communicate in different situations. So yes, then definitely we have direct method or the CLT. Other methods, of course, they in fact help you more. So then what happened in the GNT was challenged in 1950s, 1960s by audiolingualism, right? And why it was challenged? That a method that is still very popular today talks about drills, habit formation. I talked about that on ALM. In fact, in ALM we saw there were a lot of drills were there. There were chain drills we saw. There were repetitions were there. Fine. And they're all drills were there. And the method says that give as many drills to the students as you can, so that pattern, of course, becomes habit of the student, and language learning becomes habit formation. So how? By giving them as much input as you can, by engaging them in as many activities as you can, by giving them drills. And that's why we also call it army method, right? Because what happened that, you see, of course, the background was that we needed what? Native-like proficiency in that. So that what we can do, that by giving them drills, by giving them patterns, fine. And then again, because 5 patterns, again structuralism, and then drills, that language learning is learning by doing, habit formation. The more you practice, the more you do. Still, of course, if you see at Montessori level, that what children are given drills, and the teachers, in fact, teacher speaks and the students follow. In this way, they learn that sentence pattern, and they have crammed all those sentence patterns. So there is parrot learning is there in that. So the theory behind the what? This is audiolingualism. Fine. That what? The learning is habit formation. You do drills, you practice, and you will be learning that. Fine. But if you are put in a different situations, you might be in trouble. So that is what in 1950s and 1960s, of course, GTM was challenged. So then, of course, this ALM, of course, the audiolingual method, based on the theory of learning, behaviorism, and structural linguistics. Clear? Because why structural linguistics? The pattern. You must remember that example. Yeah, what is it? That I am going to post office. So that I am going to post office remains same, and then other vocabulary items, the teacher changes with the passage of time. So the behind, of course, we're talking about this theory behind audiolingual is, that is behaviorism and structuralism. So that is, they provide what? The following characteristics. Now this behaviorism and structuralism, they provide some characteristics of audiolingualism. First one, that priority is given to spoken rather than written language. Again, the more focus was on oral skills, oral communication, spoken. And second, language learning is basically a matter of developing a set of habits through drilling. This is what second characteristics, that well, you can develop this skill by developing a set of drills, and of course you give the drills to the students, and that would be their habit formation. Fine. And then of course once you give them lots of drills, so there don't be any second thought, student would be able to speak that, and those drills would help you in having a native like the proficiency, and which was the need of the time, right? We required people having native like the proficiency, and ALM, of course, audiolingual method, was a real success in that way. So that's why the focus was on pattern, structures, and also habit formation, that is, and teach the language, not about the language, right? This is what the ALM also says, that we need to that the learner should be able to use that language, right? He should not be taught about the language, means that other, of course, other areas, grammar, fine, vocabulary are what they are teaching about the language. We should not teach about the language, rather we need to teach the language. So what happened in 1960s, if we move on, what happened? Behaviorism and structural linguistics were severely criticized as being inadequate representations of both the learning process and the nature of language. So that's why again in 1960 there was a criticism on that, on both what? These behaviorism, right? That what was the criticism? Fine. They were criticized, they are the inadequate, fine, representation of what? Both the learning process and the nature of language. Well, students, so we saw that in place of behaviorism, psychologists proposed cognitive psychology, while Noam Chomsky, a linguist, he developed a new theory called transformational generative grammar. I mean, what is that? The grammar is what? The native speaker's knowledge of language. There's nothing, the grammar is nothing in fact. Grammar is what we learn in fact. It is the native speaker's knowledge of the language. This is what the theory of what? Transformational generative grammar, Noam Chomsky. Both these approaches, I have highlighted it. What happened? Emphasized on what? Thinking, comprehension and memory, and uniqueness of language learning to human species. These both approaches, of course, behavioral approach and Chomsky's approach of transformation generative grammar, what they focused on? Yes, they focused on what, students? On comprehension, memory and uniqueness of language. So my dear students, methodologists in fact what they did, they seized on these theories and developed a method known as cognitive code learning. Cognitive code learning, what is it? Cognitive code learning promoted language learning as an active mental process rather than a habit formation. So then this cognitive, in fact, code learning talks about that language learning is a mental process. It's a thought process. It is not a habit formation. It is what? A rule formation that we had a discussion on that what we do, that whenever we have to say something, you make an hypothesis, and if you get your message done, if you feel that your listener has got the message in the real sense, it means your hypothesis was valid, otherwise it was invalid. Is that clear? So this is what this cognitive in fact code learning says, that language learning is not a habit formation. That of course you learn some patterns and of course you learn some linguistic items and you will learn the language. No, rather it is what? It is a process, my dear students. It is a thinking process. You keep on making hypotheses and you see, you make, of course you think and then you convey your message, and different situations definitely you have to make new hypothesis, and if you feel that your hypothesis works, you keep on doing that, and if you feel it doesn't work, you do it again. So that is what we call it cognitive code learning. And many more methods were adopted. In fact, outcome was the successful learning take place if learners are encouraged to adopt the right attitude and interest in relation to the target language and the target culture, of course. So again, the approach should be, if you keep the learner in mind, if the approach is learner-centered, if you encourage the learner, if you give him a relaxed environment, if you suggest things, fine, so the learning can be done in fact. So in simple words, you can say that if you adopt learner-centered approach, if you do need analysis of the learner, if you improve environment of the learning, so this environment would definitely enhance learning of foreign language. And the best known methods were silent way, Suggestopedia, and community language learnings are there in fact. So again, the approach that we talked about in the last lecture also, community language teaching. In fact, in 1970s, of course, we started this approach that talks about that, you see, the goal of the learner should be to communicate in that language. It should be communicatively strong. And how can we do that? Of course, by incorporating that. By teaching that target language communicatively. Only then you can you can achieve your goals. This is what we talked about in the last lecture. So again, now in the next lecture, we'll continue this methodology, and what else, of course, mean that, of course, what are the principles that are, important principles for foreign language teaching, and then we'll move on to what different skills that mean the all reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We'll try to see how we can teach listening skill, and what is listening, how to teach listening, and then what is reading, how to teach reading. In fact, similarly writing, how to teach writing, and of course other skills are there. So that's where we move on with this today. Any questions, students? No question? You are clear about curriculum development? All right, it's a good question, my dear students. Curriculum development means simple. The name shows that you develop, you make curriculum. And since we are going to be language teachers, so we have to see how we make our curriculum for foreign language teaching. So there are three subcomponents. What are these? Syllabus design. What is syllabus design? Yes. What? Selecting, sequencing, and justifying the content. This is very important, that whatever content you select or you sequence it, you have to justify it. How can you justify it? Yes, of course, justification can be done that if whatever the content you incorporate, does it help the learner to improve the language or not? If it does, it means you are justifying it. If you feel that you have taken a chunk from any source, that may not be useful for the learners, for example. Is that clear? For example, if your students are from the market, and you have taken a passage from, say, for example, anatomy, in fact, and definitely those are in anatomy, you have taken it from MBBS, the course from the book of MBBS. So that may not help the general learners, because there are a lot of terminologies. For doctors that can be success, but for the general learners, people who don't know the basics of the medicine, for them this content would not be justified. That's why you have to have a content you select or you sequence. It should be justified. And second component was, what was second component? Yes, methodology. Again, what is it? Selecting, sequencing, and justifying the task, of course, the learning task, fine. And third thing was evaluation. Whatever objectives you want to achieve, at the end you see that you have achieved it or not. Is that clear? That is there. This is what we call it curriculum development, and there are three sub-components of that. Any other questions? What is methodology? Again, students, of course, it is the study of what? The practices and the procedure, and also the principles underlie these practices or procedures. In simple words, what you can say that methodology is the study of your activities, your principles, right, and also the method, right? Because you see, you know what is the method, fine, and what are the principles you are, of course, behind your activities. So methodology talks about that. Anything else? No questions? All right. So students, with this, it's a time to call you, yes, to say goodbye to you, my dear students. See you in the next lecture, and we will continue this methodology, and then we will start how to teach listening skills. Very important. Now again we are going to be more practical, in fact. Earlier, what did we do? We saw how teaching was done. And now we will start that how we can teach, for example. Clear? And in the next semester, you will be teaching as well. Is that clear? So see, first of all, what is TEFL? Clear? And what are different methods that have been used for teaching foreign language? We talked about these methods, and then we are trying to see that how to teach different skills, what is the methodology for teaching those skills, and what is the curriculum development, curriculum design, syllabus design, then methodology, and of course evaluation. I hope you have understood. Thank you very much. See you in the next class. It's Allah Hafiz.